My name is Danielle Mercer, and I'm 29. If you ask my parents, they'd tell you I'm fine. Doing okay. Getting by. The kind of vague description people use when they don't want to admit they don't really know your life anymore. But I remember every time they proved it. Every, we forgot to tell you. Every, it just didn't work out. Every trip I saw later in photos, smiling faces in places I'd never been, posted like I was never supposed to notice the empty space where I should have been. So when Dad stood up at my younger sister Ashley's 23rd birthday dinner, tapping his glass with a fork like he was about to deliver something grand, I didn't expect anything good. The table was crowded and loud. Drinks had been passed around so many times I'd stopped counting. Dad was 5 drinks in, maybe more, his cheeks flushed, his grin wide. Ashley sat beside her husband Josh, glowing in that way people glow when they're used to being celebrated. Dad cleared his throat and said, "We decided to go to Europe without you." I blinked. Without me? I waited for the punchline, for him to laugh and say he was joking, for someone to glance my way and realize how brutal that sounded. But Ashley cut in before I could even speak. "Good," she said, smiling like she'd just told the joke of the century. Everyone laughed. Not real laughter. That awkward, half-hearted kind where people aren't sure if it's safe, but they don't want to be the one who kills the mood. And honestly, I wasn't even angry. It was just familiar. Another reminder that I was always the odd one out, that no matter how many times I showed up, no matter how many birthdays I attended, no matter how many polite smiles I forced, I was still optional. My parents had taken 4 big trips over the past few years, and I'd never been invited. I always made excuses, work schedule, timing, like whatever lie was easiest to swallow, but this time I wasn't in the mood to pretend. So I laughed too. That caught everyone off guard. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip of my drink, and asked, "What money do you plan to use for this trip?" Mom and Dad exchanged confused looks. "What do you mean?" Dad asked, his grin fading. I chuckled again, shaking my head like I couldn't believe I was the only one willing to say it out loud. "Do you know that Ashley and her husband spent all the money you gave them?" You could have heard a pin drop. Ashley's expression hardened instantly. "That's not true," she snapped. Dad's face darkened. "What money are you talking about?" I exhaled and decided to lay it all out. Right there, right in the middle of the birthday candles and half-eaten cake. "The money you gave Ashley and Josh to save for a house," I said. "They're not saving it. They're blowing it on clubs and restaurants and other crap. The accounts you set up for them are empty." For a moment, nobody moved. Dad stared at Ashley, then at Josh. Josh looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Mom's mouth opened slightly like she was trying to process the words, like they didn't fit the version of Ashley she'd carried in her head for years. "Danielle's lying," Ashley blurted out. "You always do this. You can't stand to see me happy, so you make up stories to turn Mom and Dad against me." I shrugged, keeping my voice calm because I already knew what she was doing, turning it into jealousy, because that was easier than admitting the truth. "You can check the accounts yourself," I said. "It won't take long to see who's telling the truth." Josh didn't say a word. He just kept staring at his plate, hoping everyone would forget he was there. Ashley glared at him, and the way her eyes narrowed told me she wanted him to save her, to jump in, to lie with confidence, to back her up. But he stayed silent, and that silence was louder than any confession. Just like that, the fight exploded. My parents started yelling at Ashley and Josh, demanding answers. Ashley yelled back, at them, at me, throwing out excuses, accusations, anything she could grab. I sat there for a minute watching the chaos unfold, feeling something cold settle in my chest. It was like all the resentment and tension from years of favoritism, broken promises, and unspoken grudges were boiling over in real time. And I'd had enough. I quietly got up and walked out. No one even noticed I was gone. That dinner was supposed to be a celebration for Ashley. Instead, it turned into an all-out war. And to be honest, I didn't feel guilty about it. After everything they put me through, being treated like an afterthought, only invited because Grandma insisted, I figured they had it coming. Maybe this time they'd finally see Ashley for who she really was. The next morning, my phone started exploding. Missed calls from Mom, from Dad. Texts asking where I was, if I was okay. It was like they suddenly remembered I existed. I didn't respond at first. I wasn't in a hurry to step back into their drama after last night's circus. But when I finally decided to call Mom back, she was practically vibrating through the phone. "Danielle, why didn't you tell us sooner?" she demanded. I let out a short laugh. "Do you think you would have believed me if I had?" She went quiet. And in that silence, I could almost hear her thinking, realizing I was right, realizing that over the years, they'd always sided with Ashley. She was their golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was the loser. Even after I got fired from my last job, it wasn't just the pitying looks I got from them. It was the way they started treating me like I wasn't worth their time. If Grandma hadn't kept insisting I come to family gatherings, they probably would have stopped inviting me altogether. "We checked the accounts," Mom finally said. Her voice was smaller now. "You were right." Of course I was right. Ashley and Josh had been blowing through their savings for months. I'd heard about it from mutual friends who'd seen them at expensive restaurants and nightclubs. I hadn't planned on saying anything. But after Dad's little announcement last night, I couldn't hold my tongue. It wasn't just about Europe. It was about years of feeling like I was on the outside looking in. "What's going to happen now?" I asked, more out of curiosity than concern. "Well, your father is angry," Mom said. "He's been fighting with Ashley all morning. Josh left the house early and hasn't come back. We're trying to figure out what to do next." Then her voice softened in a way I wasn't expecting. "Danielle, I'm sorry for everything. We didn't realize how bad things had gotten between you and Ashley. We want to make things right." I wasn't expecting that. I didn't know how to respond, so I kept it simple. "Okay," I said. After we hung up, I sat there letting it sink in. I didn't know if I could trust this sudden change in attitude. Part of me wondered if it was just embarrassment. Angry at Ashley, sure, but probably ashamed of how blind they'd been. Still, a small part of me felt relieved. Like maybe things could finally change. Later that afternoon, Dad called. He didn't say much at first, just grumbling about how disappointed he was in Ashley and how Josh was a freeloader. Then he surprised me. "Listen," he said, "your mother and I have been talking. We want to make it up to you. How about you come on a trip with us? Just us. No Ashley." I had to stop myself from laughing. "You're serious?" "Yeah," he said. "We were thinking of taking a road trip up the coast. Something simple, just to spend some time together. We owe you that much." This was definitely new. A year ago, the idea of my parents inviting me on a trip, just me, would have been unthinkable. And here they were, trying to make it right. It felt strange, but also satisfying. Like all those years of being overlooked were finally catching up to them. "I'll think about it," I said, trying to sound casual. "Good," Dad replied, and hung up. I knew this was far from over. Ashley wouldn't go down without a fight, and I doubted Josh would stick around much longer, especially now that my parents were turning against her. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, like I had the upper hand. It wasn't about revenge. Okay, maybe a little, but it was more about finally getting recognition. They couldn't ignore me anymore. The next day, my phone rang again. This time it was Ashley. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. I figured she'd either apologize or yell. With Ashley, it was always one or the other. The second I picked up, she hissed, "You really think you're hot now, don't you?" I sighed. "What do you want, Ashley?" "You had no right to bring that up in front of everyone," she snapped. "You ruined everything. Josh is pissed. My husband might leave. Mom and Dad won't stop interrogating me. All because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you spent all their money," I shot back. "This isn't my fault, Ash. You did this to yourself." Her voice sharpened. "You think you're better than me? You've been unemployed for months. You're basically living off Grandma's charity. The only reason they invited you to dinner was because she begged them to." It stung, but I wasn't going to let her see it. I let my voice go calm. "Funny how you're the one who's broke now, not me. Good luck explaining that to Mom and Dad." She let out a frustrated growl and hung up. Typical Ashley, always trying to shift the blame to someone else when things didn't go her way. I figured that was the last I'd hear from her for a while. I was wrong, because later that day, Mom called again, and her voice was tight with panic. "Danielle," she said, "can you come over? Things are escalating." "Escalating how?" I asked, already feeling my stomach drop. "Josh packed up his stuff and left," she said. "Ashley is in a bad place right now. She's saying some disturbing things." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stay out of it, but another part of me, against my better judgment, felt a flicker of guilt. She was still my sister. "I'll be there soon," I said. And as I grabbed my keys, I had a sinking feeling that walking into that house was going to pull me straight into the next level of this war. When I arrived at my parents' house, the whole place felt like a storm had already torn through it. Not the loud kind you hear from the driveway, the quiet kind that leaves everything standing, but wrong. Like the furniture is the same, the walls are the same, but the air has been poisoned. My boyfriend had offered to come with me. He stood by the door while I grabbed my jacket, watching my face like he could see the decision I was fighting with. "Do you want me there?" he asked. I swallowed. "I don't know what I want," I admitted. I don't want anything to happen. He nodded slowly. Then I'm coming, not to fight, just to make sure you don't walk into this alone. That was him. Quiet loyalty. No speeches, no pretending it didn't hurt, just presence. So when we pulled up and I saw Ashley pacing behind the living room window like a trapped animal, I felt his hand tighten around mine for half a second. Inside, Mom and Dad looked exhausted. Not sad, not guilty, exhausted, like they'd finally been forced to carry the weight they'd spent years dumping on me. Josh was nowhere to be seen. Ashley was in the living room, pacing and ranting, her voice bouncing off the walls like she wanted it to break something. The second she saw me, she spun around, eyes wild. Are you happy now? She spat. Josh left because of you. My boyfriend stepped slightly closer to my shoulder, not threatening, not aggressive, just there. I kept my voice level. Josh left because he doesn't want to face Mom and Dad, I said. Don't put that on me. You don't understand anything, Ashley snapped. She pointed at me like I was the villain in a story she'd rehearsed 1,000 times. You think I'm just some spoiled brat. You think I wake up and decide to ruin everyone's life. Dad rubbed his forehead like his skull hurt. Mom looked like she'd been crying, but she wiped her cheeks so quickly you might have missed it. Ashley's breathing was fast, shallow. She kept pacing, like stillness would force her to feel something she couldn't control. Then she said something that caught me off guard. I've been under pressure, she blurted out. Real pressure. I frowned. Pressure from what? Spending other people's money? Her eyes flashed. From living in a house where I have to be perfect, she shot back. From being the one you all look at like I'm supposed to be the dream daughter. From watching you sit there acting like you're above it, like you've never needed anything. I almost laughed because it was absurd. But then she said the part that made the room go quiet. Josh has been unemployed for almost a year. Mom's head snapped up. What? Dad's jaw tightened. Since when? Ashley's shoulders rose defensively. We didn't want to tell anyone, she said, voice cracking. Because we knew you'd judge us. We thought we could handle it. We thought it would turn around. Josh, unemployed. For a year. I stared at her, trying to reframe everything I'd been watching from the outside. The clubs, the restaurants, the forced laughing photos, the way she'd always looked like she was sprinting to stay ahead of something. So instead, I said slowly, you used the savings Mom and Dad gave you. You drained it. She flinched. We thought we could replace it. You didn't replace it, I said. Her eyes watered, but her voice sharpened again, like vulnerability offended her. And of course you couldn't wait to kick me when I was down, she snapped. You couldn't wait to embarrass me. That's not what this was about, I said, shaking my head. I just wanted Mom and Dad to see the truth. Yeah, well, congratulations, she hissed. Mission accomplished. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. And then I remembered the dinner, the laugh, the way she smiled when Dad announced Europe without me, the ease she had, with cruelty, when she thought she had the upper hand. Dad stood up abruptly. Enough, he said. The room froze. Dad was usually the last person to admit a mistake. He was the kind of man who would rather double down than say he was wrong. So when he spoke next, it landed heavier than Ashley's yelling ever could. We've all made mistakes here, Dad said, voice tight. But this fighting isn't helping anyone. Ashley scoffed, but Dad kept going. Ashley, you have to take responsibility for your actions. He looked at her hard. Not just the money, the lying, the entitlement, the way you've treated people. Then his eyes shifted to me, and I felt something in my chest tighten. And Danielle, he said, you're not off the hook either. Ashley's mouth opened like she was thrilled to hear that. But Dad's next words were not what I expected. We should have been there for you when you lost your job, he said. We should have been there for you for a long time. We're a family, and we need to start acting like it. Silence. Real silence. Mom's lips trembled. My boyfriend's hand pressed lightly against my back, grounding me. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe Dad. Part of me wanted to scream that it was too late, that you don't erase years of neglect with one sentence when the golden child finally gets caught. Still, it was a start. Ashley muttered, "Whatever," and stormed off toward her old bedroom, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the picture frames. Mom sank into the couch like her legs had finally given out. Dad sat back down slowly, staring at the floor like he was seeing something he'd refused to see for years. I stayed a little longer, because leaving felt like surrender, and because some small part of me needed to hear my parents say the words again. Out loud, without Ashley's noise filling every crack in the room. Mom wiped her face. "We didn't realize how unfair we've been," she whispered. Dad didn't argue. That alone felt surreal. When I finally stood to leave, Dad followed me to the door. "Hey," he said quietly. About that trip. We've been looking at some places. We really want you to come with us. I hesitated. My boyfriend stayed a step behind me, letting the moment be mine. I'll think about it, I said. Dad nodded, like he understood that was all he deserved right now. When we got back to my place, there was a text message waiting from Grandma. Proud of you, Danielle. You deserve better. It hit me harder than I expected. She had always been the only one in my corner, the only reason my parents kept inviting me to anything at all. And now, for the first time, it felt like the ground was shifting. Not healed, not fixed, but shifting. I didn't expect to hear from Grandma again so soon, but she called early the next morning. Her voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it I hadn't heard in a long time. Danielle, she said, I thought you should know what happened with your sister last night. I sat up, dread sliding through me like cold water. What did she do? Grandma sighed. She came over late. She was drunk, angry. Angry at who? I asked, though I already knew. At me, Grandma said, for always supporting you. She said you turned your parents against her, and it was all my fault for coddling you. I wasn't surprised. Ashley always needed someone to blame when the mirror got too close. But then Grandma said the part that made my stomach drop. She tried to threaten me. I sat frozen. Threaten you how? Grandma's voice hardened. She said if I didn't make things right, she'd tell everyone I was losing it. She said she'd try to get control of my finances. She said she'd convince your parents I'm no longer fit to live alone. My mouth went dry. She said that to you? She did, Grandma replied, but she didn't expect me to fight back. I could hear Grandma's breath, steady and controlled. I could picture her standing in her own living room, unshaken, while Ashley tried to claw for power the only way she knew how. I told her I would not be blackmailed by my own granddaughter, Grandma said. I warned her I'd call the police if she didn't leave. Did she leave? I asked, a knot forming in my chest. Not at first, Grandma said. She tried to bluff, said I wouldn't dare. Then Grandma's voice sharpened like steel. But you know me, Danielle. I don't play games. I called the cops right in front of her. My heart pounded. And? That finally scared her off, Grandma said. She ran out like a coward. I sat there in silence, staring at nothing. Ashley threatening Grandma wasn't just a tantrum. It was a line, a new low, a level of desperation that didn't care who it hurt anymore. Why would she go that far? I whispered. Grandma didn't hesitate. Because she's desperate, Shumer, she said. You exposed her. For years, your parents believed she was perfect. Now that image is shattered, and she blames you for ruining it. She's lashing out because she's afraid of losing control. My boyfriend had been standing near the doorway listening, his face tightening with every word. When he stepped closer, his eyes met mine with a quiet certainty that made me feel less alone. Grandma paused, then her tone softened. You're not alone in this, she said. Your parents are starting to see the truth, and I'll always have your back. But be careful. I don't think she's done trying to cause trouble. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. Ashley was spiraling, and the way she'd threatened Grandma told me something I didn't want to admit yet. If she couldn't control the story, she'd try to control the money. If she couldn't control the money, she'd try to control the people. And somewhere deep in my gut, I felt the next chapter coming. Because Ashley wasn't just losing, she was getting dangerous. After the incident at Grandma's house, everything moved faster. I didn't need to tell Mom and Dad what Ashley had done. Grandma had already called them herself, her voice calm, precise, and impossible to dismiss. By the time Dad called me that evening, his tone had changed in a way I'd never heard before. Not defensive, not confused. Final. That was the last straw, he said. Threatening your grandmother crosses a line she can't come back from. And just like that, the family rules Ashley had lived by for years stopped bending around her. Mom and Dad cut her off completely. No more money, no more covering rent, no more answering calls, just to check in. They blocked her number, blocked her on social media, and they made it clear, through one final message, that until Ashley took full responsibility for everything she'd done, she was not welcome in their lives. It was surreal. For years, they had defended her at every turn, explained away her behavior, smoothed things over behind closed doors, and now, suddenly, they were done. Ashley didn't take it quietly. She sent angry texts from unknown numbers, left voicemails dripping with guilt and rage. She even showed up at Dad's office one afternoon, demanding to be let in, crying loudly enough that his assistant had to ask her to leave. None of it worked. Slowly, her attempts lost urgency, lost volume, lost effect. And then Josh filed for divorce. I heard it from a mutual friend first, not from Ashley. She never told me anything directly anymore. Josh had officially moved out weeks earlier, but filing made it real. Final. Whatever illusion Ashley had been holding on to collapsed overnight. I didn't celebrate it. Josh wasn't a great guy, but even he had reached his limit. Living inside Ashley's chaos had worn him down until leaving felt like survival. After that, Ashley disappeared again. For weeks, no one heard anything. No messages, no sightings, no drama leaking through other people. I knew better than to think that meant peace. About 2 months later, Mom called me with a heaviness in her voice. "She showed up here today," she said. My chest tightened. "Ashley?" "Yes," Mom replied. "She just appeared on the doorstep." I pictured it instantly. The knock, the pause. Ashley standing there with that look she used when she wanted to look fragile instead of guilty. "What did she want?" I asked. Mom exhaled slowly. "She said she had nowhere else to go. She begged us to let her stay, just for a little while. She said she was ready to start over, that she wanted to fix things." I closed my eyes. "And?" I asked. "We said no," Mom said. The word landed heavier than I expected. "You really turned her away?" I asked quietly. "Yes," Mom replied. "Your father and I agreed. We can't keep enabling her. We told her she needs to take accountability for the money, the lies, the threats, everything. Until she does that, she can't stay here." I felt a strange mix of emotions twist together in my chest. Shock, relief, and guilt. "How did she take it?" I asked. "Not well," Mom admitted. "She got angry, accused us of abandoning her, said we were brainwashed by you and Grandma, but we didn't give in. Eventually, she left." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. For once, my parents had stood their ground. It felt strange, watching the roles finally reverse. Ashley had always been the favorite, the protected one, the exception to every rule. Now she was facing consequences she couldn't talk her way out of. A few days later, I heard through a mutual friend that Ashley was staying at a cheap motel on the edge of town. No job, no husband, no family willing to rescue her. For the first time in her life, she was completely on her own. Weeks passed, then months. Ashley became a ghost. My parents barely mentioned her. When they did, it was brief and careful, like touching an old bruise. Word spread quietly that she'd moved to another city a few hours away. No one knew exactly where. No one seemed eager to find out. It was like the entire family had finally agreed, without saying it out loud, to stop chasing her chaos. And while Ashley faded out, something unexpected happened. My relationship with my parents began to change. Not magically, not overnight, but honestly. We spent more time together, had conversations that didn't revolve around Ashley. They admitted things I'd waited years to hear, that they hadn't been fair, that they'd leaned too heavily on Grandma to handle me, especially after I lost my job. They didn't excuse themselves. They owned it. And when Dad brought up the road trip again, the one he'd mentioned after the dinner, I said yes. Just once. The trip was awkward at first. Long stretches of silence, polite conversations that felt like we were learning how to be around each other without Ashley dominating the space. But as the days passed, something softened. We laughed, shared stories, ate meals without tension hovering over the table. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the extra child no one wanted around. I felt like I belonged. Ashley, meanwhile, tried a new tactic. After months of silence, I got a message from her. No threats, no insults. Just victimhood. "Danielle, I know I messed up," she wrote. "I'm sorry for everything. I've been through so much. Josh left me. Mom and Dad turned their backs on me. I'm all alone. I don't have anyone. Please, can we just talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to think maybe she'd finally hit rock bottom and was ready to change. But the smarter part of me recognized the pattern. Ashley never reached out because she cared about me. She reached out because she wanted something. And this time, I wasn't going to give it to her. I didn't respond. Neither did my parents when she tried again. That silence wasn't punishment. It was a boundary. The last I heard, Ashley was still in that new city, working part-time, scraping by, no big comeback, no dramatic redemption arc. Just consequences. And strangely enough, I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel pity either. I felt indifferent. She had made her choices. And for the first time, she was living with them. A few months after Ashley disappeared from our daily lives, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't waiting for her anymore. For years, even when she wasn't physically present, she'd lived in my head, in the tension before family gatherings, in the careful way I chose my words, in the constant expectation that the next call, the next crisis, the next manipulation was just around the corner. And now there was nothing. No dread, no anticipation, no vigilance. Just space. Mom and Dad kept their distance from the subject of Ashley, not because it was forbidden, but because there was nothing left to say. When her name did come up, it was usually followed by a quiet sigh and then a change of topic. They weren't pretending she hadn't existed. They were accepting who she was and what she'd cost them. One evening, after dinner at my parents' house, Mom surprised me by saying something I'd waited my whole life to hear. "We should have protected you better," she said softly. "We let things slide because it was easier than confronting them, and you paid for that." Dad nodded. "We won't do that again." There were no excuses in their voices, no justifications, just truth. It didn't erase the past, but it closed a door I'd been standing in front of for years. As for me, things slowly started to improve. I found steady work again. Not glamorous, not perfect, but honest. Mine. I stopped measuring myself against Ashley's imagined success and started rebuilding my life on my own terms. I wasn't the loser of the family anymore. I was just me. Ashley tried one last time to reach out. It came as an email, long and carefully written, filled with words like reflection, growth, and healing. She talked about therapy she'd considered, about lessons she was learning, about wanting to reconnect as sisters. I read it once, then I closed it. I didn't forward it to my parents. I didn't ask Grandma what she thought. I didn't analyze it for hidden hooks. I simply let it go unanswered. That was the real ending. Not the yelling, not the exposure, not the fallout. The moment I realized I didn't owe her a response. The last I heard, Ashley was still living in that other city, still working part-time, still rebuilding slowly, without applause or rescue. No dramatic turnaround. No redemption arc anyone clapped for. Just consequences unfolding quietly. And maybe that was the most fitting ending of all. Because Ashley had always needed an audience. And now there wasn't one. Sometimes people who try to control everything end up losing it all. And sometimes the people they tried to control finally get their lives back. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm standing in someone else's shadow. I feel solid, present, seen. And that's more than enough.